So today we're extremely grateful to have with us Mr. Rahul Sagar Sahai. Mr. Sahai is a lawyer and author, a social activist. He's currently working as legal counsel in Sahai Chambers of Law. His earlier work experience includes having worked with firms such as Khaitan and Co., Luthra and Luthra Law Offices. He's also the co-founder of Sarthak Advocates and Solicitors. Mr. Sahai has over 15 years of experience in law, specializing in various corporate laws and dispute resolution, including alternate dispute resolution. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi Meghna, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm fine.
Okay. So I
Yeah.
would first like to start with asking you, in your vast experience of working with dispute resolution, would you like to share an experience that you've had with us that has made you learn something in the field of dispute resolution?
Yes, absolutely. And there have, in fact, been a lot of many instances where a lawyer gets to learn. In fact, every day is a learning experience. If I would have to, pinpoint a particular experience, I would say I'm also a counsel for Delhi High Court Legal Aid Committee. Now, in there, a very unique kind of a case which came to me. Now, there are two laws, conflicting laws. One is the Senior Citizens Maintenance and Welfare Act. The other one is the Domestic Violence Act. So, essentially, the Domestic Violence Act essentially safeguards the interest of daughter-in-laws, while on the other hand, the Senior Citizens Welfare Maintenance Act essentially safeguards the interest of senior citizens. Now, typically in Indian scenario, most of the time, daughter-in-laws stay with the senior citizens, which is the parents-in-law. And again, there are a lot of disputes, lot of issues which come. So typically, both these two sets of marginalized classes, they try and take help of their own statute and try and evict each other. Obviously, daughter-in-law says that she cannot be evicted because she has certain rights over matrimonial home. On the other hand, the senior citizen says that this is my house and I want you to go. So how do you strike a balance between these two marginalized section is something very interesting came to me because as part of Delhi High Court Legal Aid Committee, so these two sets of cases very regularly come to me, and in the court I had the privilege to argue these two cases literally one after the other, in which in one of the cases I was arguing for in favor of the daughter-in-law, and in the other, which is two items down the line, I was arguing in favor of the senior citizens. So again, now the law has taken some shape, but what it showed me that as a lawyer, you need to be prepared for both the sides. It's not black and white. You need to understand that there are a lot of issues which is a complex issue, and a lot of things play a part. And lawyers should always be very open-minded to understand both sides of the coin. And whatever you get to defend, you have to defend with all your heart and brains. So that is something which is a very big experience for me.
That's very well said, sir. I completely agree with what you're saying. So you mentioned that it's really hard, it's really important to strike a balance, and that's what mediation seeks to do. So in your experience, because you've worked as both for alternate dispute resolution and litigation, what are your opinions on adversarial dispute resolution and amicable dispute resolution, and which case do you think is appropriate for which method?
Look, these are not mutually exclusive processes. Obviously, they both complement each other. I have seen extremely complex litigation getting resolved through amicable dispute resolution process, and I have seen seemingly extremely simple, issues between two brothers. They are not even after 7 rounds of mediation, we have not been able to resolve it. And frankly speaking, it should have been resolved in like 5 minutes or so. So what I'm trying to say, so these both of these two are essentially complementing each other. Now, if you ask me which are the cases in my experience which should go to amicable dispute resolution or mediation process, look, there are in a broad spectrum of cases what we see. On one side, you have a purely commercial litigation. Now that is very easy. There is a chance because it's a business decision. So people are very open-minded in terms of getting whether they are getting the bang for the buck. If they have, it's a cost analysis. So they figure out that it's extremely costly to go for litigation rather than it makes more sense to settle the matter, and they will settle the matter. The interest will automatically get aligned. On the other side of the spectrum, there is purely emotional issues, purely ego issues. Typically, for that matter, is matrimonial disputes. So if you know how to settle the emotions, how if you the wife has some kind of issues with the husband, the husband has some kind of issues with the husband. So once you know how to strike a balance between them, those also get resolved at some point of time. Now, in between these two spheres, now there's a huge area where brothers are fighting with each other on property issues. So now this is not purely emotional, but there is some money involved as well. But unfortunately, in my experience, this huge area, where the property matters are being involved, the family matters are being involved, where the partition is being talked about, discussed. Company issues. Most of the companies in India are essentially family-owned companies, so it is not purely commercial. Neither it's purely commercial nor it's purely emotional. So here there's a problem. So whenever you will try and sort out uh, emotional issues, the financial aspects will someone will come with the financial aspects. And if you are able to resolve the financial problems, then someone will take up the emotional issues. So this is a huge area where mediation I have seen is seldom successful. But in a purely commercial dispute, it's extremely recommended. In fact, if you see the latest amendment which has come to the Commercial Courts Act actually mandates that you have to first go to the mediation before you will even start off with the actual institution of the suit, if you are not seeking any urgent relief. So that point is absolutely valid, that in a purely commercial suit or a purely commercial issue cases, you have a better chance to resolve it through mediation. So these are the cases should definitely go for mediations. Matrimonial suits should definitely go for mediation. In between, there lies the skill of a mediator.
So you mentioned that so some acts in India have now mandated that mediation is necessary for the parties to do first, right? So do you think, based on that and based on your previous experience, that mediation in India is reaching its full potential? And if not, why not?
Look, you also have to see mediation. What is the potential for mediation? That's number one. That the other bit is at what stage you can think in terms of mediation as the necessary means to resolve a dispute. You see, India does not have the institutions. Obviously, it's extremely statute aided, but consider a case where it goes to a local court in some Sihor district in Madhya Pradesh. Now, they don't have the infrastructure to get the mediation right. Now, you have Commercial Suits Act, and basically through that, you are trying to aid mediation. But where is the infrastructure right now? In Delhi, we are very Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore centric lawyers. So the judges are well trained in this, judges know the importance of this. But in large parts of India, what we are talking about, these things are not working. So mediation, when you asked me whether mediation has reached its full potential, absolutely not. We are like miles away from where we should be, and many of the cases should not even go to the courts. So you have a lot of gap which we need to cover. But for that, we really need to have a lot of institutions to be there. Delhi fortunately has been doing very well because of High Court has Samadhan, which is a huge, very successful forum. But I'm not too sure whether any other part of the company, even other high courts, have been able to replicate what Delhi High Court has done here.
Completely. Infrastructure is extremely important in these cases, especially now that coronavirus has come up and online mediation is a thing. Infrastructure, especially like with Wi-Fi and internet, is extremely important. So, what do you think that India really needs in terms of online dispute resolution system to make it successful? And that now that it's been adopted by courts, now that it's been forced to be adopted by courts, what do you think are the challenges that are being faced by India?
Look, the infrastructure is a given problem, as in the lawyers, the thousands and thousands of lawyers are, even the litigants, they do not even know how to operate Microsoft Teams, for example, or Zoom, for example. So those are very genuine problems. But that's also a very obvious problem. Infrastructure, obviously, the infrastructure needs to be developed. The mediators, litigators, judges, they all need to be better trained. There is no doubt about that as well. Online, but there's a limitation with the online process. You see, it's not about the types of cases, but it is about the stages at which the cases are. So you can't say that this particular type of case will be online, will be, resolved online, and this type of case will be done offline. That is not how it works, because ultimately the fundamental of every case is the same. The procedure is the same, and those procedures are not just procedures, they actually go to the heart of the whole matter, which is the quest of truth. You need to figure out what the truth is. So in any case, what is the most fundamental aspect of to find out this truth? The whole endeavor of the court is to find out the truth. So how do you do that? The heart of any litigation is cross examination of the other side. That is the heart of everything. So once you do that, that is not possible through online, because you need to be sure that the witness is not being prompted. The judges also need to note down the demeanor of the witnesses. The lawyer who is cross-examining also tries to frame questions based on the demeanor of the witnesses, the kind of answers which he's getting. They don't want to risk it on any kind of technical issue. For example, if I'm asking a difficult question to the witness and the witness is, I'm making sure that is not even prompted by the other side. But still, all the witness has to do is switch it off and later on say that, there was a technical issue, like my daughter does in her school classes. So it's very, it's very easy to manipulate the system, and that's why increasingly there are rules which have been framed for this, but increasingly they are not being trusted, and more and more judges, they find it very difficult to, even though it looks like a very mundane kind of procedural issue, but it's not. It actually goes to the heart of litigation. Cases are made, and they are broken on the cross examination. So therefore, cross-examination is absolutely not something which you can do it on through online. Final arguments are another big chunk which you just can't do it online, because extremely the documents are voluminous. It's very difficult to showcase everything. So it's very difficult. But there are a lot of procedures which you can do it online. Like for example, completion of pleadings, which is absolutely ministerial in work. The judges do not have to really apply any mind. You just have to make sure that the compliances are being done. And that also takes a lot of chunk of the court's time. So those are the aspects which you can actually decide to be done on the online process. And those can be done. Urgent reliefs, right now in COVID situation, urgent reliefs are being argued. They are in fact being reported so often now. So all the urgent reliefs are also being taken up. But beyond this, it's very difficult for online forum to help the judiciary.
So, do you think, according to everything that you've said, do you think there's more scope for mediation as opposed to litigation in terms of an online service?
Look, mediation, unfortunately, mediation on an online service probably will not work, because you have to understand the mediation is an extremely, unlike litigation, unlike dispute resolution, where the judge comes with an authority, passes an order, everyone else they are supposed to follow it. Whether if they don't like it, they have to take it up in an appeal. Unfortunately, in a mediation process, this doesn't happen. Mediation process, you need to inculcate that kind of trust. Even if you don't trust the judge in the dispute resolution process, nothing will happen. A judge will give an order in accordance with law. But when you're talking about mediation, it becomes extremely sensitive. So mediation through an online process would probably not be successful, because the mediator needs to either speak from experience or speak from authority or power. then only then only the litigants or whoever are have approached for mediation, these people will come to terms with it. At least will try and consider what the mediator is saying. But if you do it for all these things, you need to have a proper face to face. You need to develop that kind of trust. You need to develop that kind of confidence in the mediator, which is extremely difficult through the online medium. So again, you can do bits and pieces here and there, but ultimately it will require the mediator to sit down with the other side. And there are other things, other issues, like whether it's being recorded, it's not being recorded, whether it's being recorded through a phone, all those things. The confidentiality becomes a huge issue. A lot of things I would like, practically speaking, and please don't get me wrong here, but practically speaking, a lot of lawyers and a lot of litigants and a lot of people also try and use mediators as a conduit to convey threats. Like, for example, if I want to put pressure on the other side, and if I go to the other side and say that, if you don't do this, then FIR is the next thing. We'll try and lodge FIR against all of you because this is cheating, this is criminal breach of trust, whatever you want to say. Now, if I say that directly to the other side will obviously take an offense to it and say, "Okay, do whatever you want to do. We will also do whatever we want to do." But coming all these things coming from a mediator, which is supposedly a neutral party, and this threat is being conveyed. So then the party without the ego starts thinking that whether it's worth the risk. Now, all those things is not possible on an online forum, because I would not like to say all those things on an online forum, right? So therefore, I'm saying that probably the confidentiality aspect, the mediation, the success of mediation depends on one-to-one sessions with the parties. That is where the mediator tries and breaks each party into places where the interest is aligned of both the parties. That's what the common ground is. And for that, the mediator has to use all the tricks in the bag, threat, and everything, the appeal to reason, appeal to cost, appeal to threat, everything. And that is where I think online forum will have a huge limitation, because no one will trust the process, and even the mediator will not be able to inculcate that kind of trust and confidence which you would ideally want to have.
So you mentioned before that even in a physical setting, we are far away from reaching full potential in terms of mediation. And right now, you mentioned that there are things that people do, as in convey threats to the other parties with the help of mediation. Do you think these things could be tackled with a standalone law for mediation? Do you think what do you think about a standalone law for mediation?
Look, the mediation law which is there in the 1996 Act, it is fairly comprehensive. So whether it's a standalone, the code itself is extremely comprehensive. There's a huge chapter which is not dependent on the earlier arbitration part of it. So there it is a standalone law, and for all practical purposes, you can have a different statute, it's a different matter. But what exactly do we want in that statute is the more important aspect. We already have a law now, until unless, and obviously the law can be amended, whatever, wherever we are going with it. But do we need a standalone law? I'm not too sure. As in, what is the difference which we want to create in that law? Legislation is not an easy job. So what exactly do we want? Where do we fundamentally want to change? Like Arbitration Act changed from 1940 to 1996 because fundamentally we were moving ahead from one kind of setup to a different kind of regime altogether. Now, the 1996 Act also has a separate chapter on conciliation. Now, if we do not have a lot of issues in terms of those that code, why do we need a standalone law for it? The law is still there, which is a code into itself.
That's understandable completely. And do you think that the youth, in if we, do you think that it's important for the youth to know these skills of dispute resolution?
Absolutely, absolutely. Why not? Why not? Skills of dispute resolution, skills of mediation is something which is of paramount importance for everyone, not only for lawyers, not for youth. Everyone should be completely aware of this. So it really helps. But as I have been saying, so youth will have to figure out what exactly, if it wants to become the catalyst for change, What exactly is the role? Like, for example, in my experience of the last 15, 16 years, now it's extremely difficult because the mediator has to either speak from a position of authority or has to speak from a position of experience, or you have to have some kind of power, you know. So until unless you have any of these, mediator, the person who has come for mediation will not even have that trust in the mediator or what you're saying. So youth will have a natural challenge because neither the youth will have experience, nor it could speak in from the position of authority or power. So youth will have a natural limitation. So whenever you go with a particular set, it's like, you know, trying to settle you can do this experiment, you know, your parents will be fighting and you just try and mediate in that. You see what will happen to you. So this is exactly what your parents will, you know, tell. तुम्हारे पास तुम मुझे क्या सिखा रही हो तुम्हें तो कुछ. So those kind of things, you see. So what I'm trying to say is ki, so therefore so what is the role of the youth? Obviously they can't be, they will not be, naturally speaking, youth will never be taken very seriously as a mediator, because everyone in the whole room will be far more experienced, far more powerful. So what is the role of the youth then? The role of the youth essentially when it comes to mediation is to spread awareness, because and to help the mediators and to actually reach to a particular position where they will themselves become very accomplished mediators. So here the spreading of the awareness is fundamentally the most important point, because this is somewhere where we completely lack. For example, if a person comes to me, if a litigant comes to me, my first advice to the litigant is to go to the court and litigate. I never advise him or her go and mediate. I'll never do that. No, my money is made in litigation, and plus I also do not have the trust whether it will actually get mediated. And now, if it doesn't get mediated, if there is no guarantee for mediation, at least there is a guarantee for a decision. You know, I can, whenever whatever you have filed, but after 5 years you will have some decision whether in favor or not. But in mediation, there is no decision. But what are the advantages of mediation? What is the cost point of mediation? If the youth can, in a very organized way, explain it to the litigants and show them the value that this is worth your this much amount of money. You don't have to spend a bomb right now. Just try it out with this much amount of, do a deep study. If you find it relevant, then you would be able to save, let's say if you just spend 5 rupees instead of 100 rupees on litigation, spend 5 rupees on mediation. Try whether it happens or not. If it doesn't happen, so then you are free to spend another 100 rupees or whatever. But right now your job is only, your responsibility is to only spend 5 rupees, and for a month let's try mediation. If it works out, if that is the organized way it can happen, I think it will be great. Another extremely important point where the youth will have a lot of role to play is the institution. Now we have Samadhan in Delhi, and you have other places also will have few institutions. But unfortunately, there are no further institutions specialized for mediation. So that is where, as I'm saying, it needs to come from a position of authority. Mostly court appointed mediation, they have a larger chance of success. Otherwise, it's very difficult to have a mediation being successful. So this is where the youth can actually play a very fundamental role in creating those kind of institutions in various places. So you can actually, and then you can have senior people come in, but senior people will not create the institution. That is the part of the job of the youth to create that institution.
So right now in India, the situation, as you've said, is sort of that people are really quick to take the adversarial approach because there's not enough awareness. So do you think even in their limited capacity, maybe not as mediators, but do you think the youth still has the power to change the culture, the adversarial culture in India, where people straight away opt for adversarial dispute resolution?
Look, adversarial approach is people everywhere are extremely quick to take adversarial approach. In fact, in US there is a saying, you know, see you in court. So fortunately in India, fortunately we don't have that culture. In fact, US has a huge culture where they are very quick to go to the court. India, you before, you know, you pick up a matrimonial dispute, No one even talks about going to the court for 5 years. They keep on, trying, figuring it out. Then the parents will get involved. Then the chacha will get involved. Then the taya will get involved. But they don't go to the court. So India, fortunately, does not have the culture of going to the court. US is extremely quick in terms of adversarial approaches, and other countries obviously are extremely quick. But now I see the point which you're trying to make. Whether awareness should be brought in for I'll break this into various aspects. Look, family issue is too sensitive and too confidential for any other mediator to enter into and try and figure it out at the very stage. So there are court appointed counselors, marriage counselors are there, and those are also mediators. So that is a very good approach. And now court, even in every divorce case, actually mandates mandatory sends the people parties to the mediation. Now, when it comes to the commercial dispute, yes, now there lies a huge value. Every company, for example, there can be an institutional change. Uh, for example, social CSR is an institutional change. Similarly, for mediation, if the in-house lawyers or in-house procurement managers, they are also trained in mediation and how to talk. Ultimately, everyone gets trained in mediation. It's not like that you and I will not get trained in mediation. We will, because that's it's a life skill. So every 5 years, 10 years, everyone keeps on getting trained. But if you can organize this training in a better way and probably train the newcomers, the youth, the young people at the very start of it, I think it will really help. It will really help everywhere. Wherever they go, it will really help.
So you mentioned, sir, right now that their life skills, that dispute resolution skills are life skills. Do you have any experience from your life journey or a professional experience that you would like to share on how dispute resolution skills have benefited you personally?
Yeah, I actually I have a huge family. So I stay with my two daughters, my wife, my mother, and my mother-in-law, and my father. So it's a huge family. So you could imagine, for me, it's not just a life skill, it's actually a critical skill to survive. Otherwise, I will not be able to survive. So every day I start with mediation between my two mothers, between my daughter and mothers, everything, right from wardrobe allocation, kitchen, maid. So those are the so absolutely every day. But yes, so that is something which we really have to figure it out. When it comes to office, that is also an everyday experience. There's a typical, always a tiff is going on between your juniors and the staff. So there is always the munshi will say, the clerk will say that I need these documents to get it filed, I need so much money or whatever, and the junior has a pressure to get it filed. So every day you have to sort these things out, and so those things will happen. So every day you get actually trained in this management. You may call it management, you may call it mediation skills, but this is what you need to do every day. You have to some sort of get people to form some kind of consensus, right from the prime minister to a peon. Everyone is doing it, everyone is getting trained. But as I've said before, that perhaps if an organized setup is there where people can get kind of a life coaching, that these are the issues which will happen and this is how you should go ahead and resolve it, I think that will really help. And yes, every day you face these challenges every day while growing. It's part of growing up. It's called growing up, I think. So mediation, yes, absolutely.
So, since it's a life skill and since everybody should learn it, including the youth, do you have any one advice or message for aspiring lawyers and mediators out there?
Yes, look, lawyers differently, but for mediation, there is I would definitely like to advise something. You've got to listen to the person who has come in front of you, your client. Listen very carefully what he's saying. Now, there are three things: what he wants, what he thinks he wants or needs, and what he actually needs. So there are three things. So you have to try and learn to discern what he's saying and what actually he means. So that is one of the most fundamental thing, and that there is only one way to do it, is listen extremely patiently. As a rule, you should not speak for the first 10 minutes. Let the client speak whatever he wants to speak. Now, I have seen lawyers, they lose a lot of patience. They keep on interjecting the client and saying, no, come to this point, come to that point. That probably lawyer may still get away with it, but a mediator needs to understand the emotional point. So therefore, you need to understand what he wants, he's saying, what he needs actually, and what he thinks he needs. So these are the three different points, and your journey as a mediator is to, what he wants is absolutely, that is something which is normally not right. What he thinks he needs and what he needs, that's the journey which you need to do, and you have to make him come to reach a particular position where he is okay with it. I think that is something which can only happen if you listen, and then only you will come to a position where you will be able to align his interest with the other party's interest. I think that is one thing which mediators, aspiring budding mediators like you, should definitely do.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us here today. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your expertise and giving us advice for our future. Thank you.